Mandel of Lee Mandel Consulting. Describes himself as a renowned serial entrepreneur, unless you're a PR person that did that for you.
You never know.
Technologist, investor and founder, former founder and CEO of Interlogic Solutions, one of the nation's leading security tech companies. Read these bio notes on this guy. They're like a who's who of what, right? So let's take a look at that. I'm not going to spend this time going over them again. They're right there in print in front of you. But what's so special about this is that rare is the occasion that you have the opportunity to get into the mind of a yacht owner in a public forum such as this. Most owners will shun the spotlight. They don't want any part of that. They don't want to be known. But Lee, through his own ownership and the way his approach to yachting, welcomes this kind of an opportunity to share what he knows and why he's been happy. Well, I was going to say why you're happy. I haven't determined yet whether you're a happy yacht owner.
To be determined, right?
Yeah. So, are you a happy yacht owner?
Yeah, I would say for the most part I am. It's been an interesting journey. So definitely at this point, since 2019, it's been an enjoyable experience for the most part. A lot of bumps along the road, but definitely an enjoyable experience overall.
So you said there have been a few rough spots, such as, well, tell us about the journey.
Well, I had a security company focused in New York and Florida. We sold school security technology. After the horrific events of Parkland, as you can imagine, the security industry went completely chaotic. Expanded our business, gave me the opportunity to sell the company in 2019. And upon the sale of the company, my financial advisor said, you got to make a decision. You either buy a yacht, a plane, or a farm. I said, well, not much of a farmer. My wife will probably murder me if I get a plane. So I'm definitely a boater. So we said, let's start on the journey to looking for a yacht. And that's when it all began.
So do you have the plane and the farm now in addition to the yacht?
I don't know. Just the yacht right now is enough to handle.
So at the beginning, when you and I first met, it was somewhere in a warehouse district right around here. I forget where it was, right around here.
Yep.
And we had Mike Scalisi was your broker, okay? Everybody know Mike from HMY, real sharp guy. He's on our board of directors. Why Mike Scalisi? Was he just drawn out of a hat, or did you look for him, or what was it?
That's a great question, and probably good for the people in this room to kind of understand. I didn't know Mike prior. You know, I had a boating background, grew up on boats my whole life, a 19-foot, a 24-foot, a 34-foot. You know, back in 2015, I was the crazy one who decided, now that my family doesn't have a boat anymore, to buy a boat of my own. We ended up buying a 52-foot Sea Ray. So I had that boating experience prior to 2019. Had my captain's license, ran that boat back from New York to Florida. So when it came time to buy a yacht, I didn't know where to turn. Obviously, much different than what we had purchased with the 52-foot Sea Ray, and I wanted someone I could trust. So I reached out to a friend of mine, a business owner, and I said, down in Florida, what's the go-to company? Who do I call? Where do I go? And he said, well, you should reach out to HMY. So I remember specifically, I was on my 52-foot boat in Aventura, and I Googled HMY, dialed the phone number at 7:30 in the morning, hit the button for sales, and Mike Scalisi picked up the phone. And, you know, right away, I didn't know Mike. I didn't have any experience with Mike. But he made me feel comfortable. And I remember the first thing I said to Mike when he said, are there any boats or any yachts that you're not looking to look into? Any brands, any specific types? And I said, I want to stay away from an Azimut. And he goes, why do you want to stay away from Azimut? Well, I've heard some challenges with them, and, you know, these are the brands I'm looking at, the brands I'm not looking at. He said, no problem. Within a week, Mike had sent me a whole bunch of listings. He was not very aggressive. And I told him I was just in the transition of selling my company, super busy. While this is a priority, it's not my number one priority. I said, I don't want calls every day. I don't want emails every 5 minutes. I said, I'd love to work with you. If you can work with my style of purchasing, I think we'll have a great relationship. And from that point forward, Mike was just great. He wasn't aggressive. He sent me what I wanted. And I became friends with Mike. And to this day, both Mike, his wife, and my wife are very close friends. We travel together, go on vacations together. And this all stemmed from buying a boat. And the amount of referrals that Mike's gotten from me since then because of that is just incredible.
Yeah, the chance to be able to listen to what it was that was good about Mike Scalisi and HMY and all these good things is a chance for all of you to consider the dynamics of the purchase process and ownership and all those kind of things too. And, you know, somehow I got introduced to the equation. What was that all about? Why was I there? Why'd you need me?
So I think when we went to go purchase the yacht, and again, just to elaborate a little bit more, I'm a salesperson by trade. I sold my whole life in my prior career, so it's always the most difficult sale to sell a salesperson because they read through all the sales approaches and tactics. And Mike just did a great job of that. And when I was speaking to Mike, I said, look, Mike, this is a whole different animal, and it's very rare you have a salesperson who tries to almost talk you out of the purchase and tell you all the things to be wary of. And that's what actually excited me to make the purchase even more, to the fact that I can trust him. He made me comfortable. And when we started looking at yachts, I had a bunch of questions. And even yachts that Mike had the listing on, we walked through the vessels, and I asked questions, and he goes, this one's not for you, for this reason, that reason. He didn't try to push me in one direction or another. And as we started talking further, we started getting into the questions of, do we want to charter this vessel? Is this going to be a private use vessel? I said, no, this is solely a business. I know this is not going to necessarily be an immediate money-making business, but I want to transform the yachting industry. And he said, well, I got to introduce you to a good friend of mine, a colleague, a mentor, and that's Bob. And when I met Bob, it again gave me that level of comfort that I was able to ask you the questions, get honest answers. You weren't trying to sell me a vessel. You weren't trying to sell me a charter service. You tell me how it is.
I definitely talked you out of a couple, yeah. Okay.
You told me the truth. You told me how it is, what to be wary of, what to look for. And I just felt like we were building a team when we were working with HMY, from Mike to Bob to our charter broker, to this day, Susan Harris. I felt like we were putting a solid team together, a group of people that I can be around and trust.
Well, so your attitude was into going into chartering. And I also want to mention to you, you're all going to retch when I say it again. I continue to mention this statistic that when I was with Camper Nicholson's, we developed a super yachting index, did a lot of research in the marketplace and all that, and discovered that 78% of those that buy or build a yacht have chartered at least once. So if charter is not part of your corporate profile or your business model, you're really missing it. Because once they get in and they're thinking about it and they're not sure, you can say, hey, charter once to see how you like it. And they charter and they love it, and then they charter again, and they say to each other, why don't we have our own boat? And there you are. 78%, three-quarters or better than three-quarters, buy or build after chartering at least once. So get them into that. But would you say you had been a charter success?
Yeah, I mean, I personally had never been on a charter prior to purchasing the vessel, but I have to say, when we purchased the vessel, it had about 6 or 7 charters per year, based off the history and the financials that we reviewed. And, the average that we were hoping to get was 8 to 10. And, I said, just like I transformed the security industry, I want to transform the yachting industry. And if you Google my name, there's a couple of great articles that we've written about how we've done that. And we truly have transformed the charter yacht industry. This past year we had 25 successful term charters, which is absolutely unheard of. We've had a successful amount of repeat guests coming back and forth. And we can talk more about charters and, what I attribute that success to. But my intent going into this, unlike several, owners, and I think they need to be handled differently by their broker. If you're looking to sell to an owner who wants to charter the vessel, it's a different type of sale than someone who's looking to use this for their family privately. We have our own private vessel. This is strictly a business for us. And it was a much different sale, and Mike knew that, Bob knew that from day one.
Are you deprived of using your yacht because you're chartering too much?
There's really not enough time. The way I always say, look, if we have an open week and the crew doesn't need a break, which they always need a break, but if the crew doesn't need a break, I'll be happy to use it. But I enjoy the 52-foot. I'm not fancy. I don't need the whole crew, but don't get me wrong, it's a great experience as well.
So yours is a little bit different because yours is strictly a business approach then. All right. Now, but had you intended it to be that way, or was it because you were so wildly successful that it just turned out that way? And so you stay on your 52 and you let the 116 go like crazy.
Well, the original thought was to always make it a business. Yeah. I didn't realize how successful it was going to turn into, and the level that it was going to turn into. We're actually actively, looking at potentially expanding the fleet, if you will, to another vessel because of the success. But going into this, we did go into this as the hopes to be a successful business. It was never intended as a private vessel, so to speak.
So you can you can plead the fifth on this if you want, but so the tax dynamics. And I have been working with owners for many years who have put their boats into charter. I've never been in tax court one time to try to prove the case whether they are legitimate or not, but there's like a famous checklist. So I don't mean take advantage, but do you enjoy the running it as a business and taking advantage of whatever taxes, breaks or whatever is available to you.
Yeah, so when I went to do this, I consulted tons of advisors. One of the advisors I found was a company called Yacht CFO that I found online. And, I consulted a gentleman named Bill Lair who runs that company. And I said, look, you successfully have deployed yachts as a business for many years. I want to do this by the book. What do I have to do to make this 100% legitimate business operation? And, between him, Mike, and Bob kind of guided me through the process. And there's great advantages, tax advantages, especially in the position I was in selling my business. But the key is to do it 100% by the book and to have those, trusted advisors that can guide you to doing that.
Yeah, you can't use your yacht 51 weeks a year and charter it 1 week a year and take advantage of the tax losses. I can tell you that. You said you reformed the charter business. What do you mean by that? How did you reform the charter business?
Well, the typical
From the traditional model as to what,
Yeah, I mean, the typical charter business, like I said, you see people doing 8 to 10 charters a year. They're using it for private purposes and business purposes, and they're just trying to offset costs. I went into this just like I went into any business that I've started up, and I said, is there a physical way that I can break even and then make money and gain the tax benefits of having this vessel as well? And that was the intent in going into this, is figuring out how we can do this, how we can scale it from a marketing standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint, from a PR standpoint. What's the best way to attract guests to this experience? And again, not having been a charter user forever, it was definitely difficult to kind of learn on the fly and figure out, how do I make this experience as good as it possibly can be?
Yeah. So here we got a guy who has a big yacht. Are there any plans for anything in the future to go even larger than that, or are you going to stay with the proven model and the?
Yeah, no, I think a big decision in the size, it's a 116 azimuth. Name of the vessel is Taillights. And the big thing for me was figuring out what's that sweet spot. And, we obviously know, without going commercial, the restriction we have is 12 guests. So how can we take advantage of that 12-guest layout in the smallest form factor possible, so that we can attract the largest audience as far as the charter price? And that's where this yacht fit perfectly with the layout, where we can comfortably fit 12 guests on it. Ideally, we'd love to have 10 guests on it, but we're at that mark. So I don't anticipate going bigger anytime soon. I think before I go bigger, I'd probably go with a second yacht, just because the worst thing is when you have opportunities and people looking to charter the vessel and you don't have weeks available.
Yeah.
So I think that would be my first step, but definitely enjoy the process.
Anybody care to harbor a guest? From my management experience, represented a couple thousand yacht owners over the years, how many weeks of owners' use, private owners' use, is the average on a private yacht? It's 5 to 6 weeks a year. And so a lot of owners will say, gosh, the decision to buy, they're saying, gosh, I'm still working, you're still working, we can't really use it. Why do we want to have a yacht? That's where the broker should be saying, you thought to think about chartering. Well, what's chartering all about? You got to talk to Bob Saxon, okay, first. But then get them going in that direction. Or if they say, for example, this is way too expensive, we really can't afford this, we only use it a limited amount of time, it makes absolutely no sense. And you say, why don't you think about chartering the yacht? Chartering, how does that work? Well, you got to talk to Bob Saxon. So that's how that all works, and it's a dynamic. I hate to keep going back to it, but that's the business model that we're dealing with here, okay? This isn't private, this is a business. And so build that into your sales equations as you're talking to those owners out there, where you reach those points where you can't close them, and there's objections to the closing, and you may discover that it's one of the two. Can't use it enough, or it costs too much. And the solution is to put it into a business, a bona fide business. Bob Weiss, anybody remember Bob Weiss by chance? Jeff might, Laura. He owned 7 yachts. He started at Broward with a 76, then a 90, then a 100, then a 120. I think his final yacht was a 120 Broward called Destiny. And he had a captain named Freddie Appleton. The only one that I can compare to is you, because they did 8 straight years, 120 feet, 5 staterooms, at 22 weeks a year. Oh. And Bob Weiss, and I want you to reflect on this, Bob Weiss once said to me, Bob, because I was charter managing the yacht, he said, if I'm on my yacht and I'm having dinner and you tell me that there's a charter client standing on the dock, I'm going to get up, wash the dishes, help them with their luggage, and I'll find a hotel someplace.
Been there, done that.
How important is your charter manager?
Huge. I mean, the relationship, it's a team, like I said, between yourself that we've worked with, between Susan Harris, a charter manager, Mike Scalisi to this day is actively involved in the business with us, our attorney that we work with, as well as our yacht CFO. It's a team. It's building an executive organization with these people being your C-suite, team. And it's super, super important, the relationship. When I met Susan, and this was part of the pitch that Mike made to me, is, you're not just buying a yacht from me, you're getting the team. And that was huge for me, and especially me, because I wanted to charter a vessel. And I said to Susan, look, if it's not broke, I'm not going to fix it. You've been successful on this yacht before. Here's the expectation. I want to do 20-plus charters a year. If you can achieve that for me, you're my gal. If you can't, we got to look for alternate opportunities. And so far to this day, Susan's met and exceeded those expectations.
Susan's I hired Susan at HMY. She's fantastic. So, what's the most difficult yachting decision you've ever had to make? Have there been any really difficult ones, like captain termination or anything like this?
Yeah, a couple. I can relate one to crew and one to guests. Going backwards first with the guests, I'm very hands-on and very unique. This week we have the yacht coming into LMC for a major refit, 60-plus vendors. I'm probably one of the few owners that gives the entire crew off for 2 months and manage the shipyard myself. Very unique. But with that being said, the captain relies on me to help him make decisions from land. I have an executive assistant that works directly with the captain to oversee everything. We had one charter that was on a New Year's where there was drugs involved, and we had to make a very important decision reputationally for the vessel, for the crew, for the safety, on how to effectively terminate the charter safely. And everyone was up, including the attorneys, at midnight, right after the ball dropped in New York City, to figure out how we get these guests off the boat. And it was a challenge. We got the whole team together quickly and effectively, and we're able to work through that process. And I would say the second biggest challenge is crewing. Crew is not easy, and Bob's been instrumental in helping me with that. Finding a captain that's not just the right fit for the program, but the right fit for you. Since 2019, I currently have my third captain. He's been with me for almost 3 years now. Absolutely incredible, and it's a matter of finding, you're finding a master of ceremonies, an MC, so to speak. Driving the vessel is the easy part of being a captain. It's the guests, the satisfaction, the customer service, the interaction with the owner. That was super important to me, and the first captain was great to get us started, taught me what I needed to learn about yachting. The second captain didn't quite work out as well, and we're on our third. But finding that right captain was probably the most difficult decision that I've had to make, and been one of my biggest successes as well.
Chefs the toughest?
Chefs are always tricky. One of the things I first started with when I bought the vessels, having an HR background, my wife have running HR for my prior company, saying, listen, Captain, we'll handle all the hiring. Just leave it to us. We'll do the interviews. Just worry about running the boat. And that was probably my biggest mistake I made, because ultimately you have to have the crew respect the chain of command. And, we realized after the second captain and with the third captain, we said, look, you're going to be in charge of all the staff. We're going to hire you. We're going to deal directly with you. You're my singular direct report. And then it's up to you to decide the crew, as long as they fit the mold and work. You have to live with these people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're going to basically help determine the success of your gratuity that you receive and the success of repeat guests. So I'm going to put that in your hands. And that was a mistake I made at first, but something soon corrected. And, chefs are also very difficult to find, keep, and maintain.
I maintain that chefs don't think of themselves as crew members, that they think of themselves as artists. and there are more breakdowns in crew performance. I hope we don't have any chefs in here. It's not related to you, but more breakdowns in crew performance at the chef level, because they are in their own little domain there, and they don't want to do any bright work, and they don't want to do this and that. And they're out there and doing their thing, and they're artists. They're not part of the working crew. So it causes dynamics, crew dynamics that are issues and all that. The crew is the key to your charter success, however. You can have the greatest yacht in the world. It could be the most fantastic, all the water toys, all the amenities, the perfect layout, everything's perfect. If that crew doesn't want to charter, the brokers will learn of that immediately, and you'll never get charters. So you're averaging 25 a year, or you just had this big giant peak year and all that?
No, we were averaging 25 a year. Even during COVID,
Yeah.
we found ways to utilize the vessel. We found these small trips that people wanted to do up and down the intercoastal. So we were able to succeed. But yeah, we've maintained an average of 20 a year right now.
Amazing. The Bob Weiss approach to chartering. Yeah. So let's get back to the brokerage relationships. I know they want to hear about that. What the successful. What advice can you give these brokers out here that are bird dogging clients, and they finally get a dialogue going with the client? One thing that you mentioned that I think is very important is to develop other relationships beyond the business relationship. You mentioned earlier that you're friends now with Mike and his wife and your wives and all that, and you vacation together on occasion and all that. So developing these additional lifelines with yacht owners, like getting involved in their charity or playing golf with them, who knows what it is, beyond the business situation. Would you reflect on that?
So I would say the biggest thing I can say is be genuine. Typical yacht owners have been successful in the past. They're making a very large purchase, whether it's a 50-foot boat or a 150-foot vessel. So they've been successful. They've been through it all. They've been in the sales space. They've had success, and they're looking for genuine people. And, when I purchased my 52-foot boat, it was a typical salesperson. I don't keep in touch with that person anymore. I had no issues, but it was a one and done. And that, yes, while he sold me a vessel, made a couple dollars, I haven't referred him anything since. So the way I always look at it is when you're in sales, and this is any type of sales, you want to look at that potential sale not just as, all right, I sold Lee a 116-foot vessel, but how can I harness that relationship to have him bring me into another 116 deals? And that's really what I think Mike was very swift at doing and very smart about doing. And he was genuine. He wasn't putting on a show. He wasn't becoming my friend just to get the sale. Ultimately, he wanted the sale. He got the sale. And there's been many, many sales since then that he's gotten just from the referral. So being genuine is probably the number one, genuine and honest is the number one piece of advice that I would give a yacht broker.
And talk you out of buying the wrong yacht. Talk you out of buying the wrong yacht, that's for sure. Is there anything you would have done differently?
So anything I would have done differently with the purchase, definitely not. I'm very happy with what we did, how we did it. I think we bought a vessel that was the right vessel for us, the right size, the right time. The right efficiency. If I could have predicted that COVID would have happened, that would have delayed things, obviously, because it's definitely a rough year, even though we did get by successfully. But nothing different on the purchase. Different on the process, of running the vessel, 100%. Like I said initially, trying to be everything for the vessel, like the HR department, probably wasn't the best move. But everything else has been quite a success for us. Been very happy with it. And again, the key is doing everything by the book, keeping organized. Just listening to the last presentation about insurance and legal matters, super important, not to cut corners, to do everything organized, and to find the broker who's going to share with you exactly what the truth is. I remember meeting with Mike, and, we met with a few different people at different boats, and one of the brokers on another boat that we were thinking to purchase was telling me how that boat's going to make me money within 6 months. Yeah. He gave me a printed out list of financials that looked great, and Mike said, Lee, it's bullshit. That doesn't exist. He goes, that's not the way it's going to be. He goes, if I want to sell you the boat, I tell you to believe that.
I think I developed an operating budget for you, the way back, a general indication of what this is going to cost you and all that. I think I did project 10 weeks of charter to or something.
Yep.
Is it possible for you to maintain a work-life balance? Because you're the yacht manager. You're you hands-on. I've never been in a situation where I've heard where the crew get 2 months off. Like when we first had this seminar scheduled a month ago before the big storm and all that, Lee said to me, I'm not sure I could be there, but the excuse was, I'm interviewing vendors for my refit. In other words, he had the vendors lined up outside his office door, and he's interviewing them as to what their capabilities are, how much they think this is going to cost, and all that. So that work-life balance thing, because you're managing, you're also still working, you're actively working, are you not, in other businesses? Yeah.
So, first, today was actually supposed to be our sea trial, and like most typical owners, quote unquote. I was running the sea trial too today, but that got pushed up to early next week. But you know, it's definitely difficult in any business to have a good work-life balance. You know, in my prior business, prior to selling it, you know, this was a 24/7 operation. I was extremely hands-on, and when I sold that business at 42 years old, I can't retire, so my wife wouldn't be too happy with me. She wants to put me back out there working. So this was my new business to have, the yachting business, and you know, it's a full-time job for me right now. I really enjoy it. I do some other consulting. I have a couple of other investments into a few other opportunities, but I'm extremely hands-on with this. It's frustrating at times, just like any business can be frustrating. You know, there's problems that come up unexpected. They always say boat stands for break out another 1,000. When you're dealing with the charter yachts, break out another 10,000. There's things breaking every day. There's issues that are always happening. But it's having a good team behind you, from the crew to people like Bob, and even to this day, Mike. I can't tell you how many times I call Mike post-sale to say, hey, having an issue with the generator, do you know anyone? And I've used so many of his vendors that he's had great experiences with, and I've stayed away from so many of the vendors that he's had bad experiences with. So I think keeping that relationship solid with your customer after the sale is huge, because that's going to lead to future sales.
Yeah. Well, you also, to the nth degree, you did your homework. And a lot of buyers coming into this marketplace don't do their homework. They get overwhelmed with the emotion. They walk up, they touch, they run their hand along the paint. This is beautiful. It's sexy. We're getting it. Forget everything else. We're getting it. And the broker, in their zest and their zeal to put the deal together, will sell them a bad boat at times and all. So then not in the favor of their customer. So I'm going to leave it at that. That is the peek into the mind. But I want to know if there's any questions, Andy, out here. We have a yacht owner sitting up here. And he's obviously been through the rigors, and he's a happy, successful yacht owner. Any questions that we can ask of him? Or did I get it all done? That's it? Nobody? Anybody? There we go. Right here. Wait for the mic, please.
So Lee, listening to your presentation there, you've mentioned 24 charters a year. What is your burnout on the crew? You know, retention of the crew, a lot of them at 12 cry and complain about the charter process. And then the other one that you mentioned was COVID was a situation what was concerning to you. From my point of view, and looking at one of the vessels that I sold, the post-COVID was very beneficial to us in the charter situation. But when it came to 2024, what is your charter revenue now?
So all three questions are great questions. First, with the crew. Crew is, like I said, the most difficult component and the most important component. So what I did when we brought on our crew and we found solid crew is we created what we call a virtual rotational program. Unlike a traditional rotational program, we basically built relationships with the crew and said, look, this is a very busy program. You're going to make more money in a 4-month window than you typically would make on a 1-year window on a charter vessel. We'd love for you to stay on as long as you can, but we don't want to wait till you're burnt out to then have to find crew. Would you be interested, Chief Stewardess, of doing 4 months on, 4 months on a slower program, and then guaranteeing us that you'll come back in 4 months? And we've designed our crew agreements, our seafarer agreements to support that with the right crew. And I'm not saying every crew member is like that. You know, same thing with our captain. We've built a program with the captain where we have 2 or 3 fill-in captains that fill in for him multiple times a year, which is very important. We also have a very lenient policy with the captain taking time off when we're not on charter and whatnot, seeing his family, inviting his family on the vessel with him. So the crew dynamic's super important, and trying to find that balance with them, because you are correct. 4, 5, 6, 7 charters in a row, the money seems good until they get burnt out and walk off the boat. And we had that for the first year. And now with our semi-rotational program, our virtual rotation, we've been able to maintain 4 solid chefs, 4 solid chief stews, 4 solid second stews. We love to promote within, bringing our second stew to a chief stew, bringing our deckhand to a mate or to an engineer potentially in the future. So that's how we've handled that. During COVID was definitely scary for sure. There was no question that there was concerns. You know, I had bought the boat in September of 2019. There was a hurricane, I believe it was Dorian, as I was purchasing the vessel, and everything was on hold. We couldn't get insurance at the time. And then right after that, COVID kicked in a few months later. We did 2 charters, and then the world shut down. We brought the boat back to Miami, had to find cheap dockage somewhere, and figure out what we were going to do to promote the vessel. And we started promoting local charters. We found some unique charters, and it was successful for us. You know, 2024 has been a very scary year for most of the industry. And I encourage you to look at the Charter Index websites and all the different charter broker websites that you can see. And we are still incredibly killing it this year, which is unheard of. And when we started out the year, you know, Susan warned me. She said, this is going to be the year you're going to get very upset with me. And I said, we'll figure out different ways. We'll be creative. We'll contact our, you know, repeat brokers that we've worked with. We built a broker incentive program to really incentivize the brokers to push the yacht for different charters. We've given all sorts of great deals for the charters, but we really relied on our repeat guests to get us through. Where most charter boats that we're getting 5, 10 charters a year, we're down to 1 or 2. We've maintained, and where we had 25 last year, we on the books for 20 for 2024, which is incredible.
Repeat business, key to success in the charter business. We have a question over here.
You said that you vetted all the professionals and interviewed them yourself. I'm just wondering, do you have a process that you go through, or kind of, you know, judge of character, see the pants, or what does that look like?
When you're talking about the crew, or you're talking about vendors? So as far as vendors go, again, being in business, you know, and having a business with hundreds, if not thousands of vendors, you know, obviously as the CEO of the company, I dealt on a day-to-day basis with negotiation. So negotiating with vendors was always my strength. I'm very hands-on. Like I said, I have a captain's license. I'm extremely technical. I know every system in the boat. One of my titles is the CTO of tail lights, because my crew calls me 7 days a week when the router's down, when Starlink goes down, when they can't restart the navigation machine. I'm the remote IT support as well. So I'm extremely hands-on, not your typical owner. So vetting the vendors is something I do directly. You know, I have meetings with all the shipyards. I don't just automatically say I'm using LMC, I'm using Broward, I'm using this one. We'll meet with them, negotiate, we'll put out RFPs for the vendors. From the crew standpoint, that's where I haven't had success in vetting it. My key was finding the right captain, and once we found the captain, letting him vet the proper crew. That wasn't what we did the first year. The first year, me and my wife were interviewing everyone. And we had no idea how to put the crew dynamic together, and we failed miserably. But after that, when we learned a couple battle wounds and whatnot, now we let the captain kind of handle that and really focus on the captain being our core for the vessel.
Unique. Any other questions? Good. Over here. How much time have I got, Jeff? Jeff.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yep.
What yacht are you now currently owning?
An Azimut. So I'll tell you a funny story related to that. So again, I had heard, you know, horror stories about Italian vessels and challenges and, you know, getting parts and material and whatnot. So I told Mike, stay away. And Mike respected that. We saw every brand other than Azimut. And we just didn't find anything that fit the bill. And I remember I was with my father at the time. Mike was about to drop us off at Fort Lauderdale Airport. And he says, there's one more vessel I want to show you. And we've seen about 18 of them already. There's one more vessel I want to show you. It's in the shipyard right now. It's having some paint work done. It's out of the water. It's ripped apart. The ceilings are open. There's floors ripped apart. There's sanding going on. And it's an Azimut. I said, well, I don't like the fact that it's an Azimut, but I would love to see the inner workings of this vessel, what's going on behind closed doors. I said, let's go take a look at it. And as soon as we went there, I fell in love with it. I started doing a little bit more research, spoke to a bunch of people like Bob and others, and some of the concerns that I had with the brand were mainly focused around the smaller vessels of the Azimut style versus the larger. I actually took a trip out to the shipyard in Viareggio in Italy, actually saw the process, went to the Benetti factory as well, and I got a lot more comfortable with my purchase at that point and been very happy ever since.
I think we're out of time. Unique, a business plan, developed other lines of communication and connections with his broker who was particularly effective, knew what to say to them, knew how to steer them the right way, and a success in the yacht, and a happy yacht owner. Thank you for sharing all of that with us, Lee.
Thank you, Bob, and pleasure to meet everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay. We have an honored guest here today. I'm just going to give a brief introduction because there are copious notes in the program, but you'll recognize the name, even though they have it wrong in the program as NMMA. It's NMMA. Frank Hugelmeyer is a president and CEO of the National Marine Manufacturers Association, the leading trade group for recreational boating and the largest producer of boat shows in North America. He's the board chair and founding member of the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, the Washington, D.C.-based coalition of America's leading outdoor recreation trade associations, and vice chair of the International Council of Marine Industry Association. He's here to give us an industry update. Welcome, and we're honored, Frank Hugelmeyer.
Testing. Can you guys hear me? We're good? Oh, there we are. And I'll need a little clicker. Well, first off, I want to thank the IYBA board and the members, the opportunity to meet with you and have this invitation. I really appreciate. I work very closely with Paul. We're good friends, and we greatly appreciate, on behalf of all of the NMMA members and the staff, the partnership that we have with IYBA with the Miami show. So thank you for having me. I'm going to take you through a little bit about NMMA for those who may not know about the association. Then go into some market data that we're having, the latest market data, and then I'm going to touch on some regulatory issues that I think everybody in this room should have on their radar, and then end at the end here with just some thoughts about the future of the market. But first, a little bit about myself. I'm a lifetime boater. I grew up in a boating family on Long Island. My entire family, my grandmother, my father, my uncles, the entire family had boats. We'd go over had the boats out in Blue Point. It was an absolute armada that we would take over to Fire Island every summer, and we'd literally live on the beach over the entire summer while my father would commute on the ferry. So boating is in my blood. It's why I jumped at a chance to follow Tom Damerick when he was retiring, and he was a good longtime friend and collaborator. Before that, I was at the RV Industry Association. Before that, I was at the Outdoor Industry Association. Before that, I ran companies like you do in the outdoor industry. I ran a company called Low Alpine, which was a backpack and mountaineering brand. And that's a whole nother story, just the mountaineering side of my background. NMMA, if you're not aware, we're focused really on 4 main buckets. The first is our advocacy, protecting the industry and growing the industry through advocacy and government affairs. We're also focused on certification standards within the industry, as well as the business intelligence and market research. And then we're very focused, obviously, on expanding the market, both through our boat shows, from Miami to New York to Boston to Atlantic City, Chicago, on, to the Discover Boating campaign, and how we're looking at bringing in the next generation of consumers, and particularly a much more diverse consumer. Our focus, though, right now, and I want to talk strategically, is to get proactive in our advocacy. The industry as a whole, historically, has been very defensive. Something happens to it, we're not anticipating it, it comes and hits us, and all of a sudden we're in defense. NMMA is making big investments right now. With my hire, I was hired to be based in Washington, D.C. Our corporate office was moved from Chicago to Washington, D.C. Our Canadian office was moved from Toronto to Ottawa. We're very focused on being a dominant, proactive advocacy organization on behalf of the industry, because We see going forward that unprecedented impacts when it comes to the regulatory environment that's going to threaten the industry, and we're going to be at the forefront of defending the industry on that front. One thing that I want to highlight, everyone in this room is part of a massive, massive economic engine in America. The outdoor recreation economy is a $1.1 trillion economic engine. And one of the top drivers of that economic engine is recreational boating and fishing. We're number 2 in this. This is driving 2.2% of the US GDP. That's massive. We're bigger than oil and gas. We're bigger than agriculture, outdoor recreation aggregate. And when you look at the role that we played during COVID, it was extraordinary because we invited people into the lifestyle. They were able to get and stay healthy, both from a health and wellness. And I know that was a challenging time during the charter side, but we saw a massive expansion in the industry and 1 million new first-time boat owners, which are going to go up the ladder. So we played a really important role, both from a health and wellness standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint. And I think it's really important for us to know that we're one of these critical leaders. And to just give you a little bit of background, the US government did not measure outdoor recreation as an economic sector 10 years ago. It was a collaboration with NMMA and myself when I was at the RV industry, outdoor industry, a coalition now of 48 different trade groups across the entire outdoor recreation ecosystem that advocated for us to actually get measured. Because what would happen is we would go in to government officials, whether it was at the federal or the state level, and they'd go, well, you're a nice to have. You're not a real business. Well, I think everybody in this room, one, first looks at themselves as a business, and we all make quite good livings. And it's important for them to realize we're a major, major economic job sector. And when you look at the $230 billion across the entire recreational boating industry, each and every year that we drive economically in the US, and the 800,000 jobs, you've got right now in Florida where we are, we're in the number 1 sector, number 1 region for the entire sector in the country. These are the top sectors in the states. This is a tough map to see right now, but you can see up number 2 obviously is California, just by its sheer size of that economy, being the 5th largest economy in the world, just standalone, never mind being part of the US. 3 in Texas, but New York and North Carolina, as well as Georgia. The East Coast is a major economic engine for our industry, as well as Michigan, where there's a lot of boat building and boating. Wisconsin, again, a lot of manufacturer jobs within our sector are up in that area. Same thing in Indiana and Illinois. You can find all of this information on a website in the Bureau of Economic Analysis. That's under the Department of Commerce. But to have the U.S. government actually identifying our size as a sector is really important, because it allows us to then go back, you as business leaders in your local communities and the associations and the boards at a national level, to really advocate for what we want proactively. Because everyone in a $1.1 trillion economic ecosystem should have a business growth agenda from the country. And I can tell you right now, the other industry sectors that are in the top 15 are meeting with the White House, are meeting with the Vice President, are meeting with the heads of Senate and the House. And they understand what they want in terms of growing their business sector. That's what we're working on right now collectively in Washington, D.C. NMMA is at the head of that, and I actually chair a group called the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. That entire mission is about making sure that our economic clout is recognized and that we're building that business growth agenda for all of the different segments obviously recreational boating being the most important to NMMA. One of the other things that we look at is key economic indicators and where they are. And you can see right now, we're in a pretty significant cautionary period in almost every one of the economic indicators that we look at, with interest rates being in a trouble. And historically, it's not necessarily a trouble category, being at 7%. You know, for those of us who have been around for a while, I remember 14% interest rates and things like that when I was buying my first home. But this has had a big governor because we were at such a low interest rate level in the country. And when you compound that with something that's not up here, which is inflation, it's had a huge impact on the industry in the last 2 years. So when you look at the sales of the boating market, and right here, this is the projections for this year, you can see that we've finished our COVID top. We're starting to downturn. We had around 940 boat sales in 2023 in the used, and then 259 in new. And that's declining even more. We know in different sectors right now, we're hearing as much as folks being down 20, even 30% in different categories, depending on that product category. New powerboat unit sales right now, and this actually is not correct the way it's showing up here. I don't know why it's reformatting, unfortunately, on the screen. This is further declining in 2024 and what we're projecting. That sales component, though, is important to realize that we're still above the 15-year average. So when you look at sales overall, we're still above where if you took the median across all those years, where sales have been. So we're better than where we were in 2008 to 2014. We're probably closer to right around where 2014 was within the industry. And most people are feeling like we're at the bottom. As soon as you start to see a little bit of a governor on the interest rates, you're going to start to see the market open up. And we're hopeful that we're going to see that at the beginning of this year. And I know for most of the boat builders are expecting to see that begin to take off. And a lot of economists would agree with that projection, and I've seen a lot of those presentations. One other thing I want to go back just to here before, because you can see the decline in the used market and in the boating market itself, the new boat market. Interest rates right now, we're struggling with the interest rates because the cost of carrying that inventory of where it was before the pandemic to where it is now is 30% higher. You also, the entry-level boats that were maybe $35,000 before the pandemic, after the inflation that has just occurred, is costing more around $80,000. That cost of labor is not going down. That cost of the inputs right now is not going down. And this is why what we've seen in this period is a massive increase actually in the PWC market, the personal watercraft market, because it's now becoming our entry-level product for people who want to get on the water. And people always want to get on the water. We sell experiences. That's never going to go away. But we're in a unique and very different dynamic right now where we have dealers who they have now cost inventory is 30% more than it was before the pandemic, and they're not increasing that credit limit. So you don't have as much boat inventory out into the market, which means you don't have as much manufacturing, and it continues to cycle. The one highlight in this whole period has been, whoops, I lost you. The one highlight in this whole period has been the upper end of the market. The upper end of the market is held strong because largely that buyer doesn't need to worry about the interest rate from their perspective. They're going to go into the market and they're going to get their boat. Let's talk about the regulatory environment. And for those who in the room are familiar with the vessel speed rule, all right, you've heard it. And I want to thank the yacht brokers for your support in terms of trying to get people who are getting ticketed for this issue to us, because we were able to connect them with legal defense groups who actually are using some of them right now to challenge the rule. And I could probably spend a half hour just on this issue alone. It's incredibly complex. But to give you a little bit of history and background, first, this issue came up in 2008. In October 2008, the first rule came out. What was happening in 2008 in October? It was the economic crash. And everyone was just sitting there wondering, how are they going to survive? It was just pushed out kind of quietly at a crisis moment of our country and wasn't challenged. The existing rule that exists today, which is right down in that northern part and those little kind of port bubbles that you can see in the picture, are the main port areas in the existing rule for 65 foot and over. Obviously, NMMA didn't see this at that time because just like everyone else, we were trying to survive in that window. So no one knew it existed for all this time. And then in right around 2020, environmental groups started to sue NOAA. And they sued them saying, you have to enforce this. And once that suit was lost in the federal, in court, they actually settled the lawsuit and said, all right, we'll look at implementing and doing something about this. They started to use AIS to ticket. And so in 2021, we started to see the beginnings of the ticketing that's been going on. 2022, obviously the ticketing has started to go on, and it's been going on since then. And that's really when we learned that this actually existed. And they then dropped in 2022 this new expanded rule that goes all the way from northern Florida all the way up to Maine, which means any boat over 35 feet for as much as 7 months out of the year, as far as 90 miles offshore, can only go 10 knots, the speed of a bicycle. All right? This is absurd. It's a massive government overreach. We will not allow this to become law. We will fight it with every resource that we have. NMMA has already built a very strong legal defense fund. I know that the Maine lobstermen who had a similar fight on this same issue spent about $10 million defending the rule, and we're prepared to do that at NMMA on behalf of the industry. But realize that this is not going away. We are going to see this issue metastasize over and over again. And the reason why is that initial first rule and the subsequent behaviors that have occurred. There is a massive environmental funded, it's a large foundation funded environmental campaign to actually restrict boating and that 10 knot, implement that 10 knot speed limit all along the Atlantic. You're seeing it here. They've already tried to do it in the Gulf. They're already sending flyers that they're going to be starting, trial balloons that they're going to do it in the Pacific as well as in the Pacific Northwest. It starts with them identifying critical habitat. And you've already heard that in some whales in the Gulf, they have established that critical habitat. And then comes the lawsuits from the environmental community. And if the boating community is not standing up and defending itself, what happens is just like in 2008, it just sails through. Regardless, the election, there's a couple of things that are going to impact this. First off, the Supreme Court rulings about deference to the agencies that was just overturned is a huge win for the industry because it forces NOAA not to be able to move forward with their own interpretation. Congress or the courts, we're going to have a lot of tools to push it back, but we're going to have to do that either in court or through legislation. The other pieces that are coming forward on this is that this is now at its last stages in the White House. If it moves forward and gets approved, it becomes law of the land, and we have to file suit. They have flagged, because this is so politically toxic up and down the entire coast, and we've done a massive public relations campaign to make sure that and legislative campaign to create a lot of angst by the administration. They don't want to touch this right now. And they've delayed it and delayed it and delayed it and delayed it because they're scared of putting this out. They've put it out to they pushed it out to November, which is past the election. And so we expect right now that you'll see something come out of NOAA. We don't know what the changes are on the rule. We don't have line of sight into that. But you can expect something to happen in November, and NMA is prepared to file an injunction to stop it. And then we go into a whole new phase of this battle. But make no mistake, we're going to see more attempts in the Gulf. We're going to see more attempts by environmental groups to force this sort of movement in the Pacific. Last thing, nobody wants to see whales injured. And every recreational boater does everything they can to avoid hitting anything because they don't want to damage their boat and or damage their anyone who's on the boat. The vast majority of strikes are coming from massive ocean-going ships. That's the cause of this, which is why they've picked the 10-knot speed rule. A big, massive tanker can go 10 knots in rough seas, up to near gale force winds, which is what this rule would require boaters to do. A near gale force wind in a 35-foot open-hull boat is a massively dangerous situation for the people in that boat. So we've got a consumer safety issue. We've got the arguments. We've got the legal arguments. NOAA is in a big overreach. We know we can stop this. It's just going to continue to take us to be very vocal, use our power in the $1.1 trillion outdoor recreation economy and the $230 billion impact that we have each and every year. And if you want to learn more about this, go to boatingunited.org. That's where we're doing all of the activations, and you can connect directly to your members of Congress, your senators, your governors, but we cannot stop being loud about this because there's waves of this coming behind it and of these types of regulations, particularly if the Biden administration wins. You'll see more of this type of regulation come out. Because of how friendly they are with the environmental community. On the other regulation that we've been concerned about at NMMA, and we've worked internationally with ICOMIA and others to measure and prepare a best practice research report on what is the technology of the future. And I know Jan is going to give you a little bit on what Volvo Penta is looking at in this area. But we did a consummate study where we took 5 different power systems, gasoline and diesel, drop-in sustainable fuels, hydroelectric, battery electric, hydrogen, H2O, hybrid. We looked at a variety of different systems with 9 different boat types and found out which type would be best in each of that. And what the findings showed is that there's no one-size-fits-all for the marine industry. What it also showed is that with our 12 million fleet in the United States and a 30 million fleet worldwide, the fastest way for us to reduce the carbon footprint of the industry is through sustainable fuels. That would take a 30% reduction across the entire fleet instantly. Nothing would have even close to a bigger impact. So this is going to help us. We've now shared this with governments worldwide, including here in the US, to make sure that we don't have governments trying to regulate us into a single technology like electric, like they're trying to do in the auto, because that's not going to be a solution for the marine industry. It may be in some categories, but we've actually found in this report that out of the 9 boat types, if you shifted into electric in 4 of them, you actually increase the carbon footprint. Why is that? Because the majority of boats, where are they being used right now? They're sitting at a dock somewhere. They're not like an auto where they're constantly running. And our use level is so low that the build is where the majority of your footprint is. And the build for actually EVs is incredibly high. So if you only get to 0 emissions if you ignore the build part. So we're telling a very complex story, but this report allows us to get ahead, again, going back to the proactive advocacy that we're doing, to tell the story on behalf of the industry, do it worldwide, and make sure that we're heading in the right direction. Last thing I'll say is methanol and some other technologies are going to be in the super yacht category. So we're looking at working with the yacht, larger yacht manufacturers, as well as the super yacht, to do this same study for the larger boats. This is really a 26 foot and down analysis. But it does have legs into the larger yachts, which are going to go more hybrid, and Jana knows more about this than I do. Last thing, I want to talk a little bit about why I'm bullish for the future. We have not captured our full market potential. We might be slowing right now, but we're only selling to a portion of the market in the recreational boating industry. And how do I know that? We went into the pandemic with a 16% diversity share. 16% diversity in a 40% diverse country. We came out of the pandemic with a 16% diversity share in a 40% diverse country. We are really good at selling to the people that we've always sold to. Really good. And we should never forget that. It's a core part of the market going forward, and it's going to be how we build. But the key going forward is for the industry to make that shift to where they're looking at the lawyers and the doctors and the different community groups that are different from us and different from the faces in this room that are going to capture this next market. The luxury auto is doing this really well. Luxury auto is their biggest, fastest selling in certain product categories is not the faces in this room. It's in the diverse markets. And they're selling them 2 or 3 cars. So we know right now that there's a huge market in there. We just have not made the pivot in terms of marketing in that way that we need to in the way the auto dealers did. And I think it's really important for the yacht brokers to maybe spend some more time around this. You happen to be down here in Miami and Fort Lauderdale, one of the more diverse markets. You got a lot of athletes. You got a lot of musicians. You've got a big market here that's fairly diverse. But overall in the marine industry, we're not good at this yet, and we need to admit it. And that we're leaving money on the table. We're leaving market share on the table. And the way the auto dealers did it is they switched so that they had people who were able to speak and understand and talk to those segments, whether it was Latino, African American, LGBTQ, whatever it is, they target that very specifically, and they have people who can speak to that market comfortably. We haven't made that shift yet. And there's a lot of dollars there. And so that's why I'm bullish, because I know we can double our market just by going in that direction. And Discover Boating is starting to now do target marketing around that and trying to bring a lot of those consumer segments into the boat shows so that we can begin to have those conversations and invite them. I'm going to stop there and just, again, thank you for the partnership. Thank you for the time. I can leave it open for questions because I touched on a bunch of topics. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. Yeah, no, my pleasure.
Grab some stuff, some coffee, get some caffeine going, a couple more sessions, and that's the day. Oh, pink sheets. Pink sheets. Make sure you fill out these pink sheets. It's BOBSAXON. All right.
We are IYBA, the International Yacht Brokers Association.